"Never look a gift horse in the mouth, honey," was Frank's jovial response to his wife Thelma's reservations. Nevertheless, something about this situation didn't sit right with her. That policy just seemed too good to be true. Life insurance, with lower than average monthly premiums, that supposedly never increased with age, was the sort of thing that an underwriter would offer a young couple just starting out, not an elderly couple over 65, both of whom were afflicted with numerous ailments. That young man, though amiable enough, had just shown up on their doorstep out of the blue, touting what he called the deal of a lifetime. But deep down, Thelma knew that nobody made house calls anymore. The kids were constantly nagging them to buy a computer, and droning on about how everything is done online these days. Against her better judgment, and because she hadn't seen Frank this excited about anything in such a long time, Thelma went ahead and signed the policy, while Frank wrote the check. Afterwards, she couldn't help but notice how quickly the man packed up and left once he'd gotten what he came for. The fact that she'd conceded to another of Frank's rash decisions persistently gnawed at her over the next 3 days. She hadn't even taken the time to read the fine print. But hey, there was nothing more to be done about it now. Que sera, sera, as the song goes. Whatever will be, will be. The persistent rapping at the back door startled Thelma. She wasn't expecting any more guests after their usual Sunday dinner. Frank had retired to the den to have his cigar and brandy. The kids and grandkids had gone, and she was busy clearing away the dinner dishes. She reluctantly opened the door and immediately wished that she hadn't. She never even got a glimpse of the perpetrators. Before she could even make heads or tails of what was happening, some sort of bag was placed over her head. Her hands were zip-tied behind her back, and her feet were duct-taped together. Her husband's string of invectives were the last words that Thelma heard before she was hoisted up over someone's shoulder and quickly ferreted away into the night. Frank couldn't get clear in his mind quick enough to fend off this brazen attack. He was wrenched from his sleep and flung out of his chair with such ferocity that it felt as though his heart might jump out of his chest. The intruders put a bag over his head, zip-tied his hands behind his back, and duct-taped his feet together as well. But instead of being hoisted up over someone's shoulder, Frank was violently dragged off into the night. Thelma's stomach ached from being jostled about so soon after dinner. She was thrown into the back of what she deduced was a van before she could vomit all over the hooligan that had snatched her from the comfort and safety of her home. She didn't even have time to react or cry out in any way before a loud thud startled her. It was Frank, breathless but alive. They hadn't killed him yet, and that was a good thing, because she planned to kill him herself if she made it out of this mess intact. Neither of them spoke as the van rocketed through the streets of San Francisco, on its way to what may well be their final resting place this side of heaven. They were in a suspended state of disbelief, because this was the sort of thing that only happened in the movies. When they reached their destination and the van doors swung open, the inevitable loomed like a dark storm cloud. The gravity of the situation finally sunk in when 2 men dragged Frank out, while another hoisted Thelma up over his shoulders. Both were rushed inside a warehouse and taken to an underground storage facility. Thelma was gently lowered onto the cold, damp cement in some sort of chamber, after which the bag and restraints were removed. It was so dark that she couldn't even see her hands in front of her face. She waited, listened for another loud thud that never came. Frank wasn't there. They'd taken him somewhere else, and now she might never get the chance to tell him that she loved him. "I should have said something in the van," she whispered, and then leaned forward and upchucked her dinner. Frank was ushered into a brightly lit room, stripped of his clothes and restraints, and strapped to a gurney. His head throbbed from the bright lights, and his body ached from the beating he'd taken back home in his den. That in and of itself was bad enough, but nothing could have prepared him for what happened next. It was a tribulation to even lift his head, but he managed long enough to glance around the room and only just make out a man in blue hospital scrubs and a mask. The man pushed a metal tray filled with surgical instruments alongside the gurney and adjusted the overhead light before he began. As the man in blue scrubs attached a long hose to a needle and dropped the other end into a nearby washtub, a hazy figure bent down so that Frank could see him clearly. It was that cordial young man he'd bought the life insurance policy from, only he wasn't so friendly anymore. The guy that stood before him now was a stone-faced Iceman. While the doctor was busy inserting the needle under Frank's arm, the young man went on to explain his position. "I'm sorry about all this business, Frank. At the very least, you deserve an explanation. You see, it was never about the policy. As it turns out, fresh cadavers are a hot commodity. This was a business decision, and the policy was my way in. Nothing more, nothing less." Frank wanted to kill him, but the surge of blood draining from his body left him too weak to do anything but lie there and listen. He couldn't even cry out when the doctor took a scalpel and proceeded to slice open his chest. The doc was dissecting him while he was still alive. The young man patted him on the shoulder as if to encourage him, and continued, "No hard feelings, I hope. I mean, you've lived a good life, right?" He paused to further consider and then went on to say, "Besides, you should know better than to let a complete stranger into your home. But hey, no worries. This one thing I'll do for you, Frank. I'm gonna let you see Thelma one last time. How's that?" Frank was too weak to even turn his head when they rolled his wife in on the gurney. He was fading fast, and it pained him that the last face he would ever see, the last voice he would ever hear, was that of the man who'd orchestrated his murder. Thelma was so sick that she couldn't speak when they rolled her in, and her suspicions were confirmed when she saw the young man who'd sold them that bogus policy. He wasn't the least bit bothered by Frank's death, but something about Thelma's presence unnerved him. He felt a surge of guilt over what he'd done, and offered her his sincerest condolences. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Miss Thelma. I mean, I'm not a savage, you know. I like you. I do. And because I like you so much, I'm going to stay right here by your side until it's over." She cringed at the thought of this monster being anywhere near her. But what did it matter at this point? Frank was gone, and it was clear that she would be joining him soon. She would tell him how much she loved him on the other side, and at least she wouldn't have to die alone.